This is the Heroes for Freedom podcast. I'm Rick Robison. Florence Nightingale, Angel with the Lamp. A cry for help cut through the dank night air of the hospital. The young British soldier jerked upright on his cot, clutching his bandaged shoulder as another wave of violent pain tore through his body. All around the enormous hospital ward echoed with groans, it had ragged coughing, and a low murmur, the prayers of dying men. Outside, the distant thunder of artillery rolled across the deep waters of the Black Sea. The brutal conflict known as the Crimean War, which happened from 1853 to 1856, was raging, and every day, more shattered bodies on stretchers were carried into the sprawling military hospital at Scutari. Inside, conditions were as lethal as the battlefield. The air was thick with the smell of infection and unwashed bodies. Rats darted between the beds, chased by feral cats that the doctors allowed to come in to catch the rats, hoping to catch them anyway. Putrid bandages lay piled in the corners. Surgeons worked until they collapsed from exhaustion, sawing through shattered limbs by dim candlelight, rarely washing their hands till the day's surgeries were over. More soldiers died from infection and disease than from enemy bullets. Again, the young soldier tried to call for help, but his voice was barely above a whisper. "Please, someone, water." No one came. The soldier lay back. He lay down in defeat, fever burning hotter, his breath fading. At that moment of hopelessness, the faint glow of an oil lamp appeared at the far end of the massive room. At first, it was just a flicker, moving between the rows of beds. The soldiers turned their heads weakly, those who could move, trying to make out what looked like an angel. The light came closer. It revealed the calm, compassionate face of a tall, thin, determined woman holding the light high so that she could fully assess each patient. She walked steadily past the sleeping, exhausted surgeons, past the filthy bedsheets, dirt and blood, stopping at each bed, making notes as she moved. When she reached the young soldier, she knelt beside him without hesitation. Her hands moved gently but confidently as she examined his wound, replacing the filthy bandage. She lifted a cup of clean water to his lips. "Easy now," she said softly. The soldier stared at her in disbelief. Such a beautiful woman, and here in this horrible place. What is your name?" he whispered. She gave him a reassuring smile, her warm hand on his forearm. "My name is Florence. I'm here to help." But this wasn't just any nurse. She was a miracle worker making the needed changes to turn the military hospital from a place where men went to die to a place of healing. Her name was Florence Nightingale, a true revolutionary determined to radically improve the facilities, equipment, and training of personnel. But most importantly, the sanitation and organization of the military hospital to better meet the needs of these honored warriors. This became the main topic of conversation, the patients in every ward talking about the mysterious angel who glided through the hospital rooms and corridors long after midnight, bringing cool water, comfort, and care when patients thought that they had been forgotten. They gave her a name that history has remembered, the Angel with the Lamp. But Florence Nightingale's journey that drew her to the battlefront had actually begun years earlier. She was born in 1820 to a wealthy English family who were traveling at that time in the beautiful city of Florence, Italy. Her parents had lots of money. They spent part of every year visiting the world's favorite warm and pleasant vacation spots, getting out of dreary, cold, and wet England. Because she was born in Florence, Italy, that's what her parents named her. She grew up in abundance and luxury. She received a far better education than most girls of her time. Tutors ensured that she spoke multiple languages. She learned history, philosophy, and most importantly to her, mathematics. In the early 1800s, English society had clear expectations for any girl growing to adulthood in a prominent family. Above all, she was expected to marry well into another wealthy family and host lavish social gatherings and manage refined, magnificent homes and raise equally refined and magnificent children. This, however, was not what Florence wanted. As a young woman, she believed that Jesus had called her to make the sick and suffering better, to help them, particularly soldiers in far-off wars Her plans, however, shocked her family. Nursing in the mid-1800s was not a respectable profession. Its ranks were filled with low-class, illiterate individuals. With the exception of Christian hospitals, civically managed hospitals or local government hospitals were always dirty, poorly funded, infectious, and chaotic places, with nurses viewed as the lowest of servants or even sometimes prostitutes. They were poorly trained, poorly paid, and almost an afterthought in the medical profession. Many died due to the exposure that they had to filth and disease while working long hours in hospital wards from that time. Florence's parents desperately tried to convince her to abandon her foolish notion. Florence Nightingale, however, possessed a powerful personality that drove her forward with a quiet, faith-driven, absolutely unbreakable temperament. From the age of 16, she believed this calling came directly from God. She studied science, medicine, and statistics. Though germ theory had not been widely embraced at that time, she could see that cleanliness, fresh air, and sunshine were essential to a patient's recovery. Eventually, with the money her family possessed, she traveled to Germany to receive the finest formal training, learning modern methods of patient care. As I described above, in 1854, war erupted between Russia and an alliance that included Britain, France, and Ottoman Turkey. This brutal conflict became known as the Crimean War. Armies were doing battle just using newly and highly deadly weaponry. It's interesting, this is in the same area that we see the war between Russia and Ukraine today. Therefore, the death toll skyrocketed because of these new weapons, as did the almost unlimited types of brutal war wounds. Casualty rates, incredibly, were between 25 and 40%. Reports soon reached Britain describing the horrifying conditions in military hospitals. Soldiers who survived the battlefield were dying in record numbers from infection, disease, and neglect. Florence Nightingale knew what she must do. She gathered a troop of nurses and traveled across Europe to the massive military hospital at Scutari, near modern-day Istanbul. What she found shocked her. The hospital was hopelessly overcrowded. It was filthy and disease-ridden. Sewage contaminated the water supply. Bed sheets were rarely washed or replaced. The odor overwhelming, ventilation poor, and medical supplies were scarce. Disease ran unchecked through the wards. Florence and her nurses attacked these barbaric conditions. She organized disciplined nursing teams. She hired many more helpers, local helpers, that she could train. She demanded better food be brought in for the soldiers. She ordered the beds and wards cleaned daily and ventilated the rooms, and bed sheets changed regularly, and patients were bathed. Most importantly, Florence used something rarely applied to medicine at the time: statistics. Because of her strong mathematical training, she carefully recorded the causes of death. She charted the data, proving that far more soldiers were dying from infections and preventable diseases than from actual battlefield wounds. Though she was considered a troublemaker to military hospital staff in many cases, her powerful documented evidence finally forced the British leaders to make the changes that were needed. And the results were dramatic. Within months, the death rate at the hospitals dropped sharply. Florence Nightingale had not only given wounded soldiers better quality care, she revolutionized modern nursing standards and hospital management. By war's end, her system saved thousands of soldiers who would have died. The media found out, and she returned to England a national hero. Yet she never sought fame or fortune. Instead, she worked tirelessly to reform healthcare and to improve sanitation. In 1860, she established the first professional nursing school at St. Thomas's Hospital in London. Her training methods soon spread around the globe, transforming nursing into a respectable, highly skilled profession. She studied the newly revealed germ theories that were coming out and implemented producing unheard of improvements that took advantage of this knowledge. Hospitals across Europe and America adopted her system, and they focused on sanitation, ventilation, sunlight, and compassionate patient care by highly trained professional nurses. Because of her research and fieldwork, millions of patients survived who would have died. Florence Nightingale lived until 1910, long enough to see the enormous worldwide impact of her work and research. Florence Nightingale's powerful example taught that courage did not necessarily mean charging at a loaded cannon on the battlefield. No, to her it meant standing for truth in the face of ignorance, incompetence, and corruption. She shouldered the dirty jobs that no one else wanted to do. I've heard that there are few more challenging, thankless tasks than managing a crowded hospital ward filled with horribly wounded and diseased soldiers. Florence Nightingale proved that professional caregivers are not there simply to comfort the dying, but more so to improve conditions and treatment methods to relieve suffering and to save lives. She showed how to use science and statistics to make hospitals places of healing. While others slept, Florence Nightingale walked the dark corridors carrying a lamp, cool, fresh water, and fresh bandages. She had a notebook, she took notes, and a compassionate heart and a gentle hand. More than a century later, nurses around the world still carry the spirit of this heroic woman into every long and challenging shift in the hospitals of peacetime and also on the front lines of battle. The spirit of Florence Nightingale continues to flood the darkness with angelic light, bringing the hope of a healing hand to a world that cannot seem to escape the brutalities of war. May God bless those who don't complain about a problem, but instead get in and do something about it. Thank you, Florence Nightingale, the angel with the lamp. I'm Rick Robison, and this is the Heroes for Freedom podcast.